for joining us this morning. Thank you, Sue, for setting up our recording. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lynn Giacobbe. I'm the CEO of Kendal at Home. And this Kendal at Home course series is designed to educate, engage, and inform, and most often entertain those who are joining us. We've had the opportunity to have some fantastic presenters, and today will not disappoint either. We hope that you, your family, and friends will find time to join us throughout the fall for many of the courses that we have to offer. Most of them are virtual, but increasingly we're trying to get back to in-person as conditions allow. But we want to be safe and hope that everyone who's joining us today is healthy and well. We'd also like to thank the Friends Foundation for the Aging for their generous contribution and support of our programming. They really have made it possible for us to expand and increase the reach of the programs that we're able to offer. So I'm joined today by my colleague, Paul Duffy from Boston, and also Sue Woitkin from our office here in the Cleveland area. And Paul will be helping me on today's presentation, and Sue's here to help support us as we navigate our way through our technology. I do want to let people know that you can type your questions into the chat or Q&A boxes, and we'll have time at the end to answer those questions as we go along. But before I get any further along, I want to introduce Mountaineers Ben Veras and Ty Gagne to discuss with us today Ben's recent ascent of Mount Everest and his motivations, the risk and reward equation that made this endeavor so meaningful. I have great admiration for what you've accomplished. I can't ever imagine accomplishing something like that. And it's probably not just the climb, but all that went into this, the preparation and even what you've shared about, the aftermath of it all. So we're excited to hear your story, and we're grateful to have both of you with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to you to share your screen and your story with us. And we'll be back afterwards to entertain questions and comments from our audience today. So thank you both.
Thank you, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to the Kendal at Home course series. My name is Ty Gagne. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm very much looking forward to talking with Ben, but also answering any questions that you have throughout the program and particularly at the end. I'd just like to start again by thanking Lynn, Paul, and Susan for the opportunity to be here and all of their support and assistance. I live in New Hampshire. I have a real passion for mountaineering literature. I've spent a lot of time hiking and climbing in the White Mountains. Have spent much of my life reading about mountaineering and have also taken an interest in writing about the mountains. I'm the author of 2 books. One is Where You'll Find Me, Risk Decisions and the Last Climb of Cape Matrosova. And my most recent book is The Last Traverse, Tragedy and Resilience in the Winter Whites. And I have a series of essays also that if you Google that, you're certain to have access to it. But more importantly, I'm really pleased to introduce Ben Veras and to talk to him not only about his Everest summit achievement, but a history of achievement in the mountains and the progression that was required to accomplish what he's done. And it's a real honor to be with him. I have a lot of admiration for what he's done in the mountains in particular and how he's balanced work and life. And we'll talk a lot about that today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ben to introduce himself, and then we'll move right into our discussion. Ben, good morning.
Great. Appreciate it, Ty. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Veras, and I am originally a New England native. So I grew up in Connecticut as well as New Hampshire. And have slowly found myself moving west. So I went to college and spent some time in Chicago and have now been enjoying San Francisco during the pandemic period and enjoying the great outdoors on the West Coast here. As we will see throughout this presentation, I've found a lot of joy in the mountains throughout my life, and particularly the last decade or so. I've really been had a wonderful opportunity to travel the world and experience the many cultures and the incredible landscapes of the mountain ranges around the world. And when I am not in the mountains, I work in the technology industry. So I'm working on autonomous vehicles. So, it's quite a different path than the mountains, but both really give me a wonderful sense of challenge. And it's always interesting thinking about the future and obviously.
Okay. And I think we lost you for a moment, or that was a tech issue on my side. Not entirely sure.
Yeah, sorry if my internet's a little slow. Where did I cut out anywhere?
Yeah, just after discussion about autonomous vehicles and having the balance with the mountains and career, but also traveling the world. And then I think you cut out after that.
I think that captures most of it, so
Okay.
we're good to go.
We'll move on. This is not uncommon in the virtual environment.
World.
Yep. So Ben, let's talk about where did that passion for mountaineering come from? And then along with that passion, when did Everest come into your sights in terms of something you wanted to do?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I'll kind of flip to this next slide just to kind of give a sense of it. So I really, I'd always been an outdoors person. New England, there's lots of hiking as a kid, but really where it started for me was when I had done Mount Kilimanjaro. So when I was in college, my freshman summer, me and my friend were looking for something to do, and it just kind of was on a whim. It was something that we saw that some other people had done. There was reports online that it wasn't too difficult. So we wanted to get a big travel trip in, and we went out there, and it was just such an incredible experience. It was only a week long, but you get to, 19,000 feet and just experience such an incredible culture. And I was just so excited by the experience. I kind of randomly saw afterwards that Kilimanjaro was the highest point in Africa. And that got me looking to various, other climbs. And I saw the 7 summits list, which is the highest point on each continent. And I realized, maybe that's something I can get into. I don't know about, Everest or Denali, but I figured, I'd start to kind of learn a little bit more and begin diving in. And it kind of was just a snowball from there in a lot of ways that, every time I did a mountain, I thought, okay, well, maybe I can do something a little bit harder or kind of learn more. And it's such a small community, and it's such a supportive community that, you'll run into people on mountains and they'll tell you about their experience on another mountain, and you just kind of get excited about the next one. And the wonderful thing about mountains is that there's a lot of them and they're everywhere in the world. So again, it really just kind of, the list kept growing, and I always knew in the back of my mind that, Everest was there down the road, but it was super exciting to finally realize that goal was possible in the last few years.
Great. And what did you learn on Kilimanjaro and then in the peaks that followed? We always take lessons away from life experiences, and what did you learn about yourself, I think, from that first time you stood on that summit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, what I didn't realize is that, whenever I go to the gym or try to go do something athletic outside, I could do it for 30 minutes, an hour, I get pretty bored. But the thing about, summiting Kilimanjaro, the last day, you're climbing for 10, 11 hours. And it was something that I never really imagined I can do until you get out there, until you can see the summit and you're walking towards something, and having something so concrete and that you can really reach out for and continue to push yourself. It just allowed me to go, to realize where my limits were and even potentially go past them. And so that was something that was just such a big unlock, because I think it's so hard to find things in life that can really get you to drive and find where those limits are. And so that was just a huge eye opener. And I kind of wanted to continue to explore those boundaries. I also made a lot of mountaineering mistakes on Kilimanjaro, and I'm glad, because it's a place where you can afford to make those mistakes. So I wore tennis shoes, or like very, very light hiking shoes. My sleeping bag popped. I was sleeping on the rocks. Like there was when I look back, I always joke to friends that was my hardest climb, simply because I was not prepared. And that's something that, you definitely pick up along the way and start to learn how to better keep yourself in check.
Yeah. And so talk about Whitney. It looks like Whitney was next. And So what lessons did you take from Kilimanjaro that went into Whitney, that went into the peaks that followed there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Whitney was a bit on a whim as well, and I was doing a winter course, and I actually drove from Chicago all the way out to Bishop, California, which was an incredible trip. And when I got there, it's a big mountaineering community. They have a bunch of mountain stores. So I just went. First thing was I just bought a bunch of gear. That was kind of where I first invested in real jackets and snow pants and boots and such like that. And so that was really kind of the first logistics item that I checked off, which was important. But this was also, again, it was a winter course. It was much more getting comfortable with the snow, getting comfortable on keeping yourself warm and adapting. And also, I'd say kind of my first real mountaineering. Kilimanjaro is a trek in a lot of ways, and it's a cultural experience, and it's kind of this big expedition. Whereas Whitney was much faster, but was much more like, okay, what does it really mean to mountaineer, and how are you going to combine those things later down the road, and really gave me an insight to what that's like.
And so what we're hearing is a progression, that this you didn't just show up and start climbing and say, I want to climb the highest peak in the world. You really, and I think as I said in the outset, what I really admire about your trajectory is that you're taking something away from each experience, and then you're building upon it, gaining confidence, resiliency, and so I think again, which has probably helped you in many ways making decisions in the mountains and managing risks. So can you talk about the people that you go with? Have you been part of a commercial expedition each time? Have you gone out with people that you know specifically? And just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out there for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about on these experiences, were you only going with people that you knew, or did you find yourself part of expedition, commercial expeditions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So definitely early on, I was pretty focused on using the commercial expedition companies. I just really found that when you can focus on the areas that you want to, they set up the logistics, they know the route, and it kind of takes away, again, it's what risks you're comfortable with and how you want to evolve in those risks. And I just said, okay, well, I don't want to, go in over my head right away. Maybe I'll be fine. Maybe I'll make a summit, but it might be a way worse experience. And I may be focusing way more on, okay, am I lost on the map? Then, okay, let's get down the mountaineering techniques. Let's figure out the right amount of endurance and training I need. And so I really found that to be easier. And then as I gained those skills, some of the later mountains I did, so a lot of the US based ones like Rainier and Shasta and Hood, I did a lot of those solo or with just kind of friends who are in the climbing community. And that's one of the great things too, is you just meet so many people, and they're all, if they're on these mountains, they're already excited to climb mountains. So, you can rope them into some climbs in the future, and you just find people who work with your style and speed. And so it's blended over time, but definitely early on, I encourage anybody getting into it that if you want to do some of the bigger peaks, the commercial operators are just a fantastic way and they'll let you figure out, again, how much do you want to take on versus allow them to help you.
So in that regard, the title of this program the subtitle is Discipline, Adrenaline, and Risk. Can you talk about each of those in relation to your time in high places, from a discipline and prep perspective to where does adrenaline fit in, and how does that balance with risk taking?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll kind of touch on some of my prior expeditions and some of the bigger ones that really helped me prepare for Everest. And so I think the first one that's a great example of discipline is Denali. So Denali is North America's highest peak. It's in kind of central Alaska, and it is one of the coldest places on Earth. And what happens when you're in an environment like that, where it's constantly negative 30 or negative 40 degrees, is that you kind of have to be constantly looking out for yourself. And the entire mountain's on snow. So you'll see in this picture on the right-hand side, we kind of have these sleds. You can see a lot of the gear in the background on this left photo. There's just so much that you have to take care of. In a lot of other mountain ranges, there's there's kind of support, there's porters or there's Sherpas or there's kind of other, local communities. But when you're on Denali, you're really by yourself. You have to, you're doing all your tent setup, you're digging out your platforms, you're cooking all your own food, you're carrying all your own gear. So it ends up being about 110 pounds of gear between your backpack and sled. And so that just requires day in and day out, having that discipline and focusing on those skills. And that's really important when you get to a place like Everest, because mistakes are incredibly costly up there. If you lose your glove on summit day on Mount Everest, you turn around. You've spent your life chasing it, but if that glove blows away, your hands will freeze. And so it's really important to kind of dial in those skills and realize how important all the little things are, if that makes sense.
It does. And you mentioned turnaround. Have you turned around before, and what led to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was on a mountain called Chimborazo, which is in Ecuador. It's about 20,000 feet. Its fun fact is that it is the highest point on the equator. So it's actually the closest point to the sun. But when we were about 18,000 feet, so we were climbing through the night, 8-9 hours. And we started getting in waist deep snow, and it was a crawl, and I was willing to, continue crawling on. But the local guide that I was with was in the national avalanche patrol group, and he just kind of looked through the conditions and was looking closer and closer at the snow, and just said, we have to call it here. This just it's not safe terrain anymore. And again, that's part of why you go with people who really understand the mountains and can really gauge these types of threats. And there's they said getting to the summit is voluntary, getting down is mandatory. And that's just something that's really important to me. I know that I have opportunities to go climb the mountain again. It will always be there, way past when we will. And so, we turned around and in the morning when the sun came up, we saw that whole face of the mountain shed off in a big avalanche. And so, incredibly grateful for the expertise they have there. And so it's just, it's important to know that the mountain decides who summits, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just if the guide hadn't been there, do you think, just based on your own risk tolerance, that you would have made the same decision? And I know it's easy to probably say now, but just kind of curious your thinking on that, on the turnaround without the expert voice there.
Yeah, it's hard. They say it's this is a problem for a lot of people on Everest too, is that it's called they call it the summit sickness or the mountain sickness.
Yeah.
A lot of times you've been pushing so hard and you have one concrete goal, and you want to tell yourself there's going to be a lot of hard times. There's going to be times when you're really cold or really sore, and so you'll keep climbing through those. And a lot of times you get to summits and it's wonderful. And there's people who have summited when they shouldn't have, and so. I think even in that case in Ecuador, it was much more technical issue, and I might not have known. I felt comfortable continuing to push on. I felt comfortable, crawling through the snow for a few more hours, because I said, hey, I'm 9 hours in. What's 2 more hours? But realistically, we would have been so slow that those avalanches would have gotten us in the morning. And so, I think that's something that's really important, especially again on Mount Everest. Summit day, you are so high up and you are on oxygen. You have a limited time, and so if you can't recognize that turnaround point for yourself, it can become an incredibly dangerous situation. And you're not always with somebody on summit day, and so being able to have that awareness that you're going past your limits is really important.
Sure, and I think an important point for the audience to recognize is that. Ben alluded to the term summit sickness, and that's, continuing to move up when all indications are to turn and descend. That happens on the highest peaks in the world, and it happens here in New Hampshire and at 6,000 or below
Absolutely.
feet. So important note. Ben, if you could, just for the audience, if you could maybe take us through a few slides and add a couple of comments as we go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So another expedition, and this one was really important for me, was Choyu. So Choyu is the 6th tallest mountain in the world. It's about 27,000 feet. So it's just a little bit shorter than Mount Everest. And this one I think is really representative, because most people who climb Mount Everest have never actually been above 8,000 meters. So about 24,000 feet. And that's a really critical threshold for kind of, not just preparation for Everest in terms of, the physicality, but understanding the risks and what can be involved. So a lot of people, Everest, the tallest mountain they've climbed before might be 20,000 feet or 22,000 feet, and then they go to 29, and it's just a different ballpark. what happens at 24,000 feet or 25,000 feet is that the air is so thin that it actually becomes dangerous. So you'll see people wearing oxygen masks. So if you see in the photo on the left here,
I think we've lost some audio here.
adjust to. But if you're adjusting to that on Mount Everest, you know, it's a hard place to learn new things. It's a very harsh environment in general. And the amount of time you're going to be on oxygen on Everest is much longer. Instead of 2,000 feet in the death zone, it's going to be 4,000 feet. And so I think this was a really important step in my preparation. And, you know, we kind of talked about the concept of risk as well, and getting comfortable with it. There's certain points where there are going to be big risks and you just kind of have to jump into it. And so if you look on the right side photo, this is kind of one of the ice walls. This was actually a little still frame from a video that my GoPro was recording. And it's, again, it's just, you know, you can get scared in a lot of those moments, and that's okay. It's just, you know, making sure that you can stay calm enough to make good decisions when you're up there.
And Ben, I may have missed it. Was this your first experience with supplemental oxygen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So this was kind of the first big peak, and the one where it kind of first made sense for me. There was other mountains where, you know, you can see some people, but it's not real the risk zone yet. But Choyu was definitely the first one, and again, it was a big learning experience, but
Yeah.
it was a very important one. I see a lot of people who don't know how to use the dials on their oxygen mask when they're on Everest, and that's just, you know, it's just, again, it's a scary place to be learning things. So.
And could you tell the difference when you switch to supplemental oxygen in terms of performance and cognitive awareness? And could you see a difference there?
Oh, 100%. I mean, even just, you know, on the summit of Everest, one of my oxygen bottles ran out. And so then I had to swap it. So I had about 10 minutes without it. It will hit you very quickly. You know, you become very disoriented and you get a headache really bad, you know, and there, I mean, the exhaustion thing is one point, but I mean, you know, even if you had superhuman strength, the cognitive to be on the summit ridge or to be doing some of the more technical moves on the summit of Everest without oxygen is just, and again, that's what gets a lot of people in trouble, is that they don't turn around because they're moving too slowly. And once you run out of oxygen, it becomes a much harder problem for sure.
Okay. Let's move on to, as we move through the slide deck, and again, let's talk about Everest if we could. So when did you make the commitment to do that? And then what went into the planning and preparation to get there?
Yeah, for sure. So I think around, you know, I had done Denali in 2017, and that was kind of the first, you know, meatier, bigger expedition and pretty intense one. I said, okay, well, you know, maybe Everest is possible. So let's kind of start looking into the planning for it. And I wanted to be very deliberate in my preparations. I wanted to really make sure that, you know, when I got there, it wasn't going to be a totally new experience. And so then I kind of started tracking out, what do I have to, you know, you go backwards, you say, okay, if I want to summit in 2-3 years, what do I have to get done before then? And a big part of that was doing Choyu, as I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And then, so I originally had it planned for spring of 2020. Unfortunately, as we all know, the world was a little bit different. Well, not much different than it is today, but it was, you know, a lot of things happened in March of 2020, which is right when we were supposed to go off to Everest. So I was actually just 1 week away when they canceled our trip. Nepal closed its borders. So that kind of actually delayed me a year, which was, you know, it was definitely a kind of a heartbreaking point. Obviously, you know, for the safety of everyone, it made a ton of sense. But, you know, there's about 6 months of rigorous training, and I had done Choyu in the fall, right before Everest, hoping that would be an immediate turnover experience. So to have that whole 1.5 years extra gap was something that was really challenging, and something, you know, I had to really adjust my training and you know, make sure I stayed focused, which is, you know, it's a long time, but it all worked out. So.
And what did that training look like? What form does that take?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll go back one picture. they always say the best way to practice, the best way to prepare for climbing is climbing. So, you know, a lot of it, I'll do cycling and swimming. I really enjoy because they're low impact on your knees, and they're great cardio. I also, prior to really big climbs like Everest, I'll actually sleep in a hypoxic tent. So it's a tent that goes over my bed, it seals down, and there's a machine that pumps in nitrogen. So it's adjusting. So I'm basically sleeping at altitude. So that's a bit more of the extreme for bigger mountains like Everest. But one of the things I did just 2 weeks before Everest is I went down to Ecuador, because they have a lot of mountains that are very tall that you can climb very rapidly. And so it kind of forces your body into that uncomfortable zone. So this is a mountain you'll see on my screen called Cotopaxi. So I landed at noon in Quito, Ecuador, and climbed and started climbing at midnight, and summited the next morning and flew out the next day. So, you know, it gave me a chance to, within 24 hours, get to from 0 to 20,000 feet, which again, is just really kind of psyching your body out a little bit. And it's important to kind of pressure test yourself like that, but before big climbs.
And then from there, 2 weeks later, you find yourself in the Himalayas. Is that how it went?
Yep. Okay. Yep. And so then, yeah, exactly 2 weeks from there, basically that entire 2 weeks was spent packing and finding my favorite snacks and making sure I had lots of sunscreen and lip balm. And then from there, we launched the expedition. And I think one of the, you'll also, as I go through these slides, you'll see the number of days to the summit. And so this is right at the start. And what I think a lot of people don't realize about Everest is, a lot of my friends are like, oh, will you be gone for 2 weeks? Or they think, okay, you're going to climb this mountain. It's really tall, but they just think you start at 0 and go to 29,000 feet, and it might take, 6 days. But the thing about Everest is that it takes about 55 days to climb, or the whole expedition. And a lot of that is acclimatizing. You spend 30 days between all the rotations. You spend 30 days in base camp. Base camp's at 19,000 feet, so it's still a really good elevation, but there is a lot of sitting and waiting around because you just have to adjust your body to being that high up, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't take into the math when they think about a trip like this. And
so from here, take us from base camp up the mountain. Paint the picture
absolutely.
For folks.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight, this is one of the best parts of the journey, the base camp trek. It's something that, a lot of people are able to do. There's, again, it goes up to 17 or 18,000 feet, and it is just such a special journey. I encourage, if you have the opportunity, or if you're considering a big trip, the people of Nepal are wonderful, and you get views like this every day. So this is a famous mountain called Alma de Blam, and it's just, the Kumbu Valley is one of the most spectacular in the world. And from there, we reach base camp. So base camp is, by mountaineering standards, very luxury. If you can see the tents here, they're tall enough that they're stand-up tents. So you actually have some room. You can kind of move around. There's a lot of space. There's days where it's really sunny and beautiful. There's days like this where it can be really tough and quite snowy and cloudy. And that's just something, again, you kind of just want to start to adjust your lifestyle to that, but you're going to spend a lot of time here. And this is where you get to know your team, and where you have meals, and where you sit anxiously waiting for weather to improve for summit pushes. So the base camp is very, very important. And it's something that, you have to learn how to adjust yourself to base camp life. It's a lot of routine. And then from there, we begin journey up the mountain. So as I mentioned briefly, there's rotations. So you actually will climb the mountain effectively 3 times. So we'll go up the mountain from base camp to camp 1, camp 2, spend about a few days there, come back and spend a week. Then from there, we'll kind of go back up. We'll touch camp 3, come all the way back down, and then we'll go all the way to the summit from there on a kind of a 5-day push. And so it's really, again, you kind of see the mountain multiple times, and it's interesting because you get a different perception of the risk and the evolution of the mountain as you go through. So one of the most famous areas is what you see in this picture here. This is called the Kumbu Ice Fall. So this is between base camp and camp 1. And this is definitely probably the scariest area on the mountain. So this is a huge moving glacier, and you'll see you spend about 10 hours walking through it. And if you see this picture on the right, there's just it's this huge jagged kind of minefield of huge crevasses. So some of the holes that you'll see here, kind of the darker areas on the screen, those are about 200 to 300 feet deep. And what's crazy about it is that it's always moving. It's these glaciers sliding down the mountain and kind of melting throughout the season. So when you come back through this the next time, so we end up going up and down 3 times. So it's total 6 passes through the Kumbu Ice Fall. Every time you pass through it, it changes. It's just a totally different landscape with new risks and new holes. And, there's these famous pictures of, we climb across some ladders every once in a while, and, we'll look into the holes here and you'll see ladders chewed up and eaten up from the movement of the ice, just a ladder that you might have used a day before. So this is definitely one of those areas, again, getting comfortable with the risk and the fear of the situation. And just, there's no moves that are particularly difficult here. But it's something that you want to stay calm and just, trust your movements, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'd like to just take a pause here for a moment as you talk about making those 6 passes through and the constant change and fluidity of the Kumbu Ice Fall, and then higher up with the fixed ropes. Can you just talk about the critical importance of the Sherpas to these
absolutely
climbs?
So the Sherpa team is, the Sherpa people are people who live in the Himalayan valleys, particularly the Kumbu Valley. It's a sacred valley. So they are people who tend to be born and live their entire lives in various villages in the mountains. So our whole Sherpa team is from a village called Fortsay. So they live at 15,000 feet. So they are incredible athletes. Their adjustment to the altitude and their way of living is so designed for the mountains. And so they're just they're so great to have on your team. Both they are experienced mountaineers, and also they just help. I mean, the logistics of moving up these mountains, we have a team of 10. We have 15 to 20 Sherpas with us, constantly kind of moving the camps up the mountain. So that's building the platforms and setting up the tents and helping with these ropes. So what you'll see on this screen here, if you look closely where those people are in the top left, they're on a series of ropes, and there's a bunch of ladders throughout the Kumbu Ice Fall. And these are actually set up by a team of elite Sherpa called the Ice Fall Doctors. And again, it's changing every day. So they have to go out there into these incredibly hazardous conditions and be setting up ropes and paths and courses. And it's a great honor for them, but you have to recognize the risk that these people are going through. The Sherpas will often pass through the Kumbu Ice Fall 10 to 20 times. So again, it's just a matter of risk that, every time you're in the Kumbu Ice Fall, it's exposure to risk. And you hope that you can move through it as quickly as possible. It takes me 10 hours to move through it, and the Sherpa can move through it in about 4.
Wow.
They're very quick, but also, the Sherpas won't use the ropes because they're on a time schedule. They want to set up the camps. They want to get back and forth quickly. And so a lot of them take really extreme risk, and they're very elite mountaineers, but it's definitely something that everyone's aware of in the mountains.
No, thanks for sharing that. So bring us to the higher camps leading
absolutely.
up to the summit.
Yeah, for sure. So this is what Camp 2 looks like a lot. So you can't really see too much, but in the background is the Lhotse face, which kind of brings you up to the summit ridge of Mount Everest. So you can't see it too well, but this is about 22,000 feet. So this is after you climb out of that Kumbu Ice Fall. You go across a big field, and the first time you hit this, you're about 30 days from the summit, and this is kind of when you first start really feeling like you're getting to high altitude again, about 22,000 feet, and it's constantly covered in snow. And this is where I had a lot of the experience that brought me over from Denali. Again, Denali it's the whole mountain's on snow. There's no rock. The earlier parts of Everest are on rock, but here it's entirely in snow, and it's very cold. It's very windy. And even just small tasks like you see me here putting on my boots, it's just difficult. Your hands are cold. Everything is wet. So just knowing those kind of techniques to keep your gear dry and deal with incredibly cold fingers or toes. And, there's just kind of a lot of little tricks along the way, but it's really important to begin to practice those, because otherwise it's going to be a really, really hard time.
Okay. And how long did it take you to get from the ice fall to Camp 1 to Camp 2 and then on to Camp 3?
Yep. Yeah. So getting through the ice fall the first time, so we get feet faster each rotation, but the first time it took about 8 to 10 hours through the ice fall to get to Camp 1. So the Camp 1's just kind of at the top of the ice fall. Mm-hmm. It's like the first safe spot. And then you basically go through, I'm going to go up a few slides real quick so you can see. So this picture in the background, this is what's called the Western Coombe. So in the far, far distance of this picture would be Camp 1. And then we basically walk across this big flat plateau, but there's just big crevasses every once in a while. They're kind of hidden by the snow. So it's really important to stay on the ropes and to stay on the path. You can kind of see there's a little chewed out path of feet. Because this area, it looks flat, but it can be actually really risky. So then it takes about another 4 or 5 hours to get up to Camp 2 from Camp 1. And again, it's not steep. It's more just making sure you're paying attention, and it can get, a lot of people don't realize this, but in the direct sun at that altitude, you can actually get very, very hot. You can start to kind of bake in your equipment. So it's just constantly layering. If the cloud comes over or the wind blows, it can be 0 degrees. But in the sun, again, you can sweat out, and sweating can be really dangerous because of the if it freezes on you, you're going to get hypothermic or pneumonia. So.
Okay. And Camp 2 to Camp 3?
Yep. So that happens kind of on your second to third rotation. You'll go up to Camp 3. So we'll spend a lot of days in between then. Again, we'll kind of come back between rotations, do lots of training. Like you'll see here, I'm on a little ice wall where we're practicing rope work. And then you get to Camp 3. Camp 3 is up a very large wall called the Lhotse face. So actually one of the weird things is that Everest is connected to a mountain called Lhotse, which is the 4th tallest mountain in the world. And a lot of the time you're actually spending climbing Lhotse, and then you turn up to Everest kind of on the summit ridge. So Camp 3 is on the middle of the Lhotse face. It doesn't look as steep in this picture, but it is a very, very steep. You can see that the tent is actually quite angled. And a lot of snow builds up. So there's a lot of avalanche risk in this area. This was my tent. We actually keep our tents away from each other in case one tent rolls, it doesn't pull everybody else's tent off the mountain. And, we do have some tents get destroyed, and you'll wake up in the middle of the night to one of your teammates climbing into your tent because his has, collapsed under the snow, and you'll have to wake up in the middle of the night to shovel off your tent. You can see here, this had built up quite a bit while we were away. And so this tent is at a risk of collapsing. So we had to kind of unbury this. It is not good to spend a lot of time at Camp 3. It is no matter how prepared you are, it is a pretty miserable place. And so that's really kind of when you're getting your head in the zone. This is about 25,000 or 24,000 feet. So, not a lot of enjoyment here. You're not playing, not playing catch with your friends here.
Is this where sleep starts to become a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So because of the angle here, for example, I was actually wearing a harness and attached to the top wall in the tent to prevent myself from rolling. And while that sounds secure, it's just you're not in a very comfortable position, and it's also quite windy. So the tent is rattling. Again, these are things you try to train yourself for, dealing with wind and noise and other things. But it's definitely it definitely can be quite an adjustment.
Great. And take us now to Camp 4, which Camp 4 is the highest camp prior to the summit.
Yes.
And then take us to Camp 4. How long did you stay there? And then bring us to the summit.
Yeah, for sure. So from Camp 3, you climb up the remainder of the Lhotse face, which you can see in this picture. That is a very, very long day. And so you'll get into Camp 4, which you can see here. Camp 4 is between the two mountains. So it's called the South Col. So the col is kind of a point between two mountains. So Lhotse will be on one side, Everest on the other. And it's kind of this little flat plateau. You can see the rocks that we're standing on. And in the bottom right of the picture, you see the slope going up to the summit of Everest. So this is a very, very inhospitable place. You're actually high enough that you'll be on oxygen. So when you get here, you're wearing your oxygen mask. You just crawl into a tent. And it's incredibly windy because it's kind of this little funnel between the two mountains. And we got there around noon. And you basically just go and lay down and you just try to rest because you're going to get up at midnight and begin going for the summit. It makes sense to go for the summit at night because that's when the snow is more stable because it's colder. And you'll kind of arrive at the summit in the early or mid morning. So you can even see the tents in these pictures. You can see one in the foreground that's just completely blown up. So again, if there's even a small hole in your tent, often it will shred because of the wind. So again, you'll just kind of be laying there in the middle of the night. And what happened to us is one of our teammates' tents kind of exploded, and he came and crashed with us, we had 4 people in a 2-person tent. So it can definitely be a very, intense environment, but you're also kind of starting to get your mind in the place where you're preparing to go for the summit. So here I am. I want to emphasize, I had just incredible friends and family supporting me throughout this climb. I had a bunch of notes that people wrote me, and I saved a lot of them for the summit push. So this is about 6 p.m. Just as the sun is going down. You can see I'm wearing my oxygen mask even laying down, because again, it's very, very hard to breathe up there. This camp is at about 26,000 feet. And I have my trusty can of Pringles in the back, and just from notes from friends. And this is kind of the last, you try to get some sleep. You're just so excited and nervous and it's just, it's very loud and hard to breathe. So you don't get a lot of sleep here, but you do try to lay down and comfort yourself while you can.
What a great image of just getting external support from friends and loved ones, family at 26,000 feet just prior to it going after the summit. It's a great, thanks for sharing that.
And just having the little comfort snacks that, I don't know if my mom's going to see this, but I used to love fruit roll-ups when I was a kid. I didn't get to, try not to have too many of them, but, you have your little candies, little things that remind you of home, and letters from friends. And I didn't bring it up here because it's a bit heavy, but in base camp, I had a little sat phone where I could message friends and, just stuff like that. I think what people don't realize is that, the physicality of Everest, it's hard, but, you can prepare for it. But the mental aspect of being out in an environment that harsh for 60 days, it's really wears on you. And so it's super important to have ways to, whatever it may be. For me, it's, the letters from friends and staying connected and all that. And other people, it's meditation, whatever it may be. But it's really important that you find what works for you, because even if you're physically fit, it won't matter because it can be quite crushing up there.
Yeah. So take us from the tent to the top of the world, if you would.
Yep. So we wake up at midnight and you begin climbing in the darkness. There's not a lot of pictures from there because it's very dark and it's very cold and very windy, and you're pretty focused in there. You're like, all right, well, I gotta stay in tune. And you're also trying to keep your camera alive for a summit photo. So I tried to, you keep it in your deepest pocket, trying to keep it warm. I'm sure some of you guys have had your phone die even when you're skiing. And so we climb up and it takes us about the kind of first 5 hours. We get to a section called the balcony. So I'll scroll back up. So this picture, if you look in the background, you'll see you'll see people down the ridge, and you'll maybe see some headlights in the bottom right. That's called the balcony. And that's really when you first hit the sunrise. So again, you start at midnight, it takes about 5 or 6 hours. And so then you get the sunrise over the Himalayas. And that for me was my favorite point in the journey. That for me was the summit in a lot of ways, because that's when you can first actually see the full summit. And it's also when the sun hits you and you kind of just have this sense that, like, we're going to make it, like we really have an opportunity. You kind of look at your oxygen, you see how your legs feel. When you're starting in the dark, you're like, oh man, like this is a long day. So much can go wrong. This is where everyone's journeys end. And, kind of psychs you out. But once you get here, you really feel like it's possible, and that the last, decade and the last 60 days on the mountain have been worth it. And then it's just this beautiful climb up this ridge to what's called the South Summit. And so I'll scroll back down. This picture is taken from the South Summit, and just past the edge of where that person is at the top. The summit's kind of just another, 20 minutes walking from there. And again, it's just this moment of excitement. You spend this whole last 3 hours just on this little knife edge here, just looking at the world around you. I mean, one of the amazing things about the summit of Everest is it's one of the few points in the world where you can see the curvature of the earth. And honestly, the hardest part at this point is just making sure you're paying attention. It's still, as you can see, it's still a very hazardous area. And you want to make sure that, you don't make any mistakes, but you still want to, you want to drink in all the views and the excitement. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Did you hit lines at all higher up?
So we were we were fortunate that a lot of teams did not think that this day was going to have good weather. We had about 12 hours of good weather. So we were, as you saw in Camp 3, pretty bombarded with snow. It was pretty horrendous conditions, and we were kind of pushing through a storm because we thought that there was going to be this opportunity, and we got very lucky that there was. So there was about 60 people that went up the day we went. The famous like pictures of lines, that's about 300 or 400 people.
Right.
So it really takes it takes about 200 people before you get really jammed. And we were fortunate that, we have a very fast Sherpa team, and everyone on our team has done other 8,000 meter peaks. So we're all pretty quick. So we were able to pass a lot of people. So you can see the people in this picture. I mean, that was what I was dealing with. There was definitely people in front of me. Every once in a while, you'll get to a crux. You can kind of see one kind of up here. So this is called the Hillary Step.
Yep.
It's a famous kind of crux point for anybody who's seen Into Thin Air or any of the kind of famous books on Everest. You'll wait 5-10 minutes, but it really is not too bad. I was very fortunate because you can get very cold, and you can also run out of oxygen. You might be very prepared to go to the summit, but if you wait for 3 hours in line, that's your bottle. And so you got to turn around. So it's, again, very, very, very lucky.
Yeah. And so standing on top of the world, you were the youngest person to summit that. And then you were on the team with the oldest person to summit. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a picture from the summit, and just behind me, about 20 minutes behind me, was a guy on my team named Art Muir. He is based out of Chicago, and Art is 75 years old. He is now the oldest person to ever climb Mount Everest, and he was just so full of life and just such an incredible guy. And it was his 5th time attempting. He had actually been climbing. He had first attempted it in 1990. He was actually on a U.S.-Soviet peace climb with some of the most famous mountaineers in the world. He's just lived a life full of, he's still doing skiing. He's a very active guy, but it was such an incredible experience to be up there with him, just because, not only because, his age and he had been up there, but the fact that it was his 5th time. He'd been pushing his whole life for this moment. And he grew up in kind of the early era when there was just some of the most incredible, original American mountaineers like Whitaker and Ed Viesters. He had climbed with those guys in the 80s and 90s. So it's just so incredible to see him finally reach that, and also just gives you so much light to see that you can keep doing these things. You don't have to pass some point and say, oh, I'm gonna retire from mountaineering. Maybe not Everest is for everybody, but there's still just so much out there, and yeah, that definitely inspired me a lot. I joked with him that I was 25 when I summited, and he was 75. I said, the only way I'll come back to Mount Everest is if in 50 years you're still the record holder. I will come back and I'll break your record. I'll do it when I turn 76. I told him I'd come to his 125th birthday. So hopefully we'll see. I don't know if someone will break his record. It's pretty hard at that point, but we'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. We'll see what the mountain looks like in 50 years.
Yeah. And as we get ready to go into audience question and answer, talk about standing on the top, what that felt like, and how do you stay alert for the descent? Because it can be very easy. Well, I've gotten up to the top, I can switch off now and just walk
absolutely.
downhill, and it's just as risky, if not more so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We say that the summit is halfway. I think for me, what was really fortunate about it is that, again, when you get up on that summit ridge, you can see the whole world, and that sunrise on the balcony, those were just such special moments. From there, it was 3 hours. And again, I enjoyed it. And you're looking, I always kind of tell people, it sounds anticlimactic, but the summit for me was just the kind of end of the sidewalk, right? We were on this kind of long slope, and I could see everything. And we were high-fiving 3 hours before we got to the summit because we were just so excited. And then you kind of just walk along, and then you just get there and you're like, oh, well, there's nowhere else to go, right? So this is where we turn around. So it's special. You take your pictures, and there's that official concreteness to it. But in terms of the beauty and the experience and the awe of it, there's some mountains where you don't really see what's going on until you get on the summit. But for Everest, you can really get to drink it in the whole time. What happened with me is that my generally the oxygen bottles last about 4 hours. So this was about 12 hours to the summit. So my 3rd bottle had just run out. My 2nd bottle, I was at 8 a.m. So my 2nd bottle had just run out. That creates a bit of panic. So I think that was actually what kind of got me focused on getting down. I talked to my Sherpa who had a spare bottle, and I said, hey, do you have the oxygen? And he said, oxygen is down low. And I was freaking out because I thought he like had stored the bottle lower on the mountain, because again, you don't want to be doing the Hillary step in reverse with no oxygen.
Yeah.
You know, it's just way too difficult. What he meant was, let's go like 10 feet down, because he didn't want to do it on the summit. There's lots of, there's just a lot of, you know, there's people standing around, they have the crampons on. So he didn't want to cut the bottle or the cords or anything. So he said, let's go down further. But I didn't understand initially. So I was like, oh my God, like we got to get out of here. I don't have oxygen. Like we gotta start, you know, jogging if we can. And then I walk 10 feet and he stops me and he goes, okay, oxygen now. So, you know, I feel, I'm glad there was not a mix up there, but definitely on the way down, you have to be super attentive. And it's actually it's a way more awkward motion. You know, so it's something you have to stay very focused on. And again, just try to knock out the buzz that you just summited and realize that, you know, it's about getting down for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Summit's half the journey, as you said. Well, I'm going to ask Lynn and Paul to come back into the session to facilitate Q&A. But Ben, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I think your head is just in the right place in terms of how you approach these and risk. And again, I really admire that. And my last question, I think, is before we turn it over, is what's next for you as Paul and Lynn get ready to facilitate Q&A?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think that the nice thing is the mountains will always be there. And again, they're a great excuse to travel the world. I have one of the 7 summits left. It is the peak in Antarctica. The good thing is, you know, it's not terribly difficult. It's just logistically very hard to get to the center of Antarctica. And so that's kind of next. We'll see how long it takes to get there. But I'm excited to start maybe doing some polar stuff, maybe ski to the South Pole. Some of that stuff's on my journey, and maybe a little less risk than Mount Everest. So that'll be good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty.
Paul and Lynn.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. I'm going to start with folks' questions here, Ben. The first is, why did you make 3 trips between base camp and the ice fall?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's difficult about Mount Everest, so the interesting thing is that Mount Everest is not tall. Mount Everest is high up. So the base of Mount Everest is at 18 or 19,000 feet, and the summit's at 29,000 feet. So there's actually a lot of mountains in the world that are taller than Mount Everest. Like they start lower, the base to summit is taller. But what happens is that the air is so thin at that altitude, or at those elevations, that it's incredibly harmful for your body. So even though you could go from the base to the summit in terms of like total distance and time, you could do that in maybe 3 days. But if you were to get to that elevation that quickly, you'd kind of actually faint. Like you couldn't go to bed. It would be incredibly dangerous even with oxygen. So it's acclimatizing your body. You basically spend all those 2 months changing out your red blood cells so that they're more oxygenated. And so it's a process that takes quite a long time. And that's what the rotations are kind of pushing our body up high. They say climb high, sleep low. So you climb up high, shock your body, and then you go and rest yourself. And you're kind of doing that to prepare yourself.
Oh, it's fascinating. This one, I don't know if I want to know the answer, but how do you go to the bathroom?
Yes, so it's very important. Again, there's a lot of small parts of mountaineering that add up. So lower down on the mountain, we have kind of a outhouse type thing. There's kind of a hole dug in the ground, and it's like a separated little tent thing. So that's pretty easy. As you get to camp 1 and 2, they have like kind of a bucket that you can use. Some people don't really use it. But then we just start using what's called Wag Bags. So anyone who's familiar with hiking and mountaineering who goes by the no trace policy, you use Wag Bags. So basically it's a bag that has like sanitary things in it, and then you have to carry it off. So you carry all of your own stuff off the mountain. In terms of peeing, you can kind of just pee anywhere. It will freeze very quickly. But actually on summit day, it is really hard because you're on really steep sections. So a lot of people will take, I believe it's Imodium. People will take things to basically make sure they don't go to the bathroom. And some people will pee themselves. Sorry for the graphicness, but on summit day, it doesn't really make a lot of sense and it's too cold to be stopping. So, if you drink 3 liters on summit day, and for a lot of people, that's somewhere else.
Oh, wow. Like I said, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer, but
Sorry, yeah, but it's you got to be honest with it, because a lot of people, again, some people get uncomfortable with that stuff, but when you're out there, it's not about being
it's a
comfortable. It's
reality.
about making,
Yeah,
it's a reality of the situation. So
absolutely. The next question is, give us an idea what a summit of Mount Everest would cost.
yeah, so it ranges based on what services you want, and this is where, unfortunately, there's been a lot of, because Everest is just such a big name, there's a lot of kind of cut rate groups. So there's been a ton of interest out of India and China recently to climb Mount Everest. It's just become kind of more popularized in their cultures. And so there's a lot of cut rate groups that cater to them. So you can do it as cheap as about $20,000. And you can do, kind of the good quality Western groups are about 60 to 70,000. If you're like want to do super luxury one-on-one, there's a guy named Sir Kenton Cool. He has the most summits out of any Westerners. He's been about 18 times to the summit. He charges $150,000. So again, it's really, kind of on a scale of what you want. The differences are going to be in your food quality. So people who are paying $20,000 might be eating ramen for 2 months. And again, you will see people lose 20, 30, even 40 pounds. And that's what's difficult. You might be ready to summit Everest on day 1, but on day 55, if you've lost 30 pounds, you're going to be incredibly emaciated. It's going to be very hard to climb. And so that's kind of what you're paying for. You're paying for better logistics. You're paying for Sherpas who are better. So like all of our Sherpas, like I had a Sherpa with me on summit day, and he had been to the summit 9 times. So you feel very confident that he knows the speed we need to go. He knows where to stop for swapping oxygen bottles. He knows how to monitor, water, and he can check my conditions. Other groups, and unfortunately, people who pass away on the mountain, often they're with groups who don't have experienced Sherpas, or they don't have a Sherpa for every person, so they get separated, and the person can't make good decisions. Again, as we talked about with the mountain sickness, so it really is quite a range on the mountain.
Wow.
Are there sponsorships, Ben? And did your employer help you in any way?
There are people. So there was a guy on my team who had 10 sponsors. He had like a coffee company and a cowboy hat, and he was very good at, I don't know, he's very good at media stuff, and just wrote him, I think, 1,000 emails. So there's definitely people you do see who have some sponsorships. A lot of people who are kind of there was a woman on my team who was the first woman from Estonia. So she had some kind of funding for it. So, if it can be a first, I think that helps. I think, white men named Ben is not a unique, climber profile at this point. So, my company did not help me. It's something that, I just kind of saved up for, and was a goal that I just had in mind for a really long time. But yeah, you'll kind of see all over the place. You'll see people who have like 20 patches sewed onto their suit for all their sponsors. But
Wow. So another question here in the chat is that it says the summit is only halfway. What is beyond it?
Yeah, so the summit is halfway is a way to just say that, you have to get all the way back down the mountain. If you start at base camp and you go to the summit, if you just stop at the summit, you're going to have a really bad time. So unfortunately, most of the people who actually pass on the way down. So very few people actually pass away going up the mountain. Most of the people get to the summit and run out of oxygen because they don't turn around. And that's again, what we're talking about with Ty, is that, there's this realization, hey, I have 4 hours of oxygen left. I see the summit is 4 hours away. Well, that's a problem, because the summit is only, you still have to go for another 10 hours back down to base camp, or back down to camp 4. And so it's just kind of being conscious of that. And really, being aware of that. And that's what having great Sherpas is. And that's what being, the better shape you're in, the faster you can move. So you can, that you're going to make it with the amount of oxygen you have.
Wow. Okay. David has a question. He has his hand raised. So David, I'm going to allow you to ask your question if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask. David, did you?
I did not have a question.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Jody had a question, and her question is, how many people were in your group, Ben?
Yeah, for sure. So my team was, there was 9 of us other than me, so 10 altogether. The teams can range. Again, there's some people who are solo. So there was one person who was doing a one-on-one guide, and he was using our logistics. So he was kind of in our camp area. And then there's some teams, some of the bigger operators, they'll bring like teams of 50. They kind of break them down into subgroups, and they'll go up the mountain at different times. But again, those are kind of the more concerning ones. They have less experience. They're moving, and it's like traffic. It's like anywhere else. If there's more cars, everything moves slower, right? You need to kind of wait for the guy in front of you. So, and again, the people I climb with have all climbed other huge, big 8,000 meter mountains. So we could all kind of go in a cadence. We knew how to take care of each other. We knew what to pack, how to move quickly. So it's just nice because you can rely on the people around you.
Great. Okay. Another question. I've seen Hollywood images of the Everest summit and wonder if they're accurate. Is there a cairn, shrine, prayer flags, a human mark of some kind at the top?
Yes. So I don't know if I have I'm trying to scroll through. So you can't see it too well, but yes. So just to the, my left, but in the right of the picture, there is, there's a lot of prayer flags. So the Sherpas will tend to bring them with them, and they will plant prayer flags. Obviously in the winter, they'll kind of blow off. There's no like physical cairn or like larger structure. But there are quite a lot of flags. People have little pictures there of family and loved ones, and or like a little sponsor flag or whatever it may be. So there's kind of like a little area the size of a bedroom kind of that has a bunch of scattered flags. And you just have to be careful actually, because you can kind of trip and twist your ankle up there on the pure summit. But the full summit is it's bigger than you'd think. It might be the size, it might be like 50 feet by 50 feet or so. It's, a lot of people think that they're like standing on this, little point with a flag. But it's a reasonably big area. So again, you can have 30 people up there pretty comfortably, which is good.
And my sister's asking this question, and I've made some notes as I was listening to you. I know you talked a little bit about reading the photo of the card. I think that was pretty powerful, but there had to be times when you felt like, wow, this is, harder than I thought it would be. Were there times when you thought I might not make it? And how'd you get through that? I think, any of us who've accomplished anything, you feel like there are times when you're just not going to make it to your goal. How'd you get there? What did you do?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, a lot of it is recognizing in advance that that's going to happen. As you said, like, it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be a cakewalk going in. And this is where I also think that the experience of my prior climbs helped a ton, because I went through those moments on every climb I've ever been on. Whether they were a 2-day sprint or being on Denali or Choyu. Choyu was 25 days, and it was the same thing where there was times where I just felt very weak. I felt sick when you get there. You get a headache often the first time you get there, and you think, man, if I have a headache at 18,000 feet, how am I going to make it to 29,000 feet? But I think that, I've had that experience before and gotten through it and gotten to the summit and had a great time and had many wonderful days between that headache and the summit. And so just knowing that that's going to happen and that it's going to get better, that, the worse you feel is going to get better. You want to be conscious of your health. If you're really feeling bad and it's a medical problem, of course, you want to seek help. But a lot of times it's just, you feel crummy. You feel crummy at 20,000 feet. And it's just, having that positivity behind that, whether it's the messages from friends or just kind of the reality of like, we call it type 2 fun. Like, there's times when it sucks and you just got to kind of engage in that, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Ben, my question, I'd love to know, what did you take with you?
You mean like, what did I take away from the journey, or like physically, what do I bring with me on the mountain?
Yeah, no, well, I guess maybe both. I didn't think about the physical aspect of it, but what do you take away? What's gonna remain with you throughout your life as a result of this experience?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, it was such an incredible journey. It was, it was the longest climb I've ever done. It was so beautiful from the summit. And it obviously just, any challenge you have in life, it's nice to know, okay, well, if I got through Mount Everest, I can get through, whatever it is in front of me. I think it's just an incredibly reassuring thing to bring with you. And just, again, bringing that mentality that you can put one foot in front of your other, even if the answer's not clear today, or even if we don't know if there's storms in the future, or even if we're going to get there, like knowing that you can push through that is one thing. And then the other thing is that I just climbed with such an incredible group of people. A guy from Iceland who's a pilot, and the first woman from Estonia to climb, and a girl from northern Norway who has a reindeer farm, and the oldest man to ever summit. It's so fun. I still talk with them every day, and I plan on going and trying to visit all of them, partially just because they live in incredible places, but it's just such a credible bond to have with that team. I mean, we all stood in the summit within an hour of each other, and we all saw each other on summit day, and it's really a special group. So
that's pretty incredible.
Can I ask a question, Ben?
Yeah.
How you've been on peaks and mountains all over the world in very, very different cultures. Do you leave the culture behind as the climb begins? Or do you feel a different type of experience in each of the countries that you've climbed?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of, with the exception of the United States, almost all of them have kind of Sherpas, or they'll call them porters, who are basically kind of the support staff on the mountain. And they all have their own songs, they have their own traditions. So before we climb in the Himalayas, you'll always receive what's called the puja, which is a blessing ceremony. So they actually bring a lama up. Like, we had a lama who was blessed by the Dalai. He lives in Pengboche, which is one of the high temples. His temple's at 16,000 feet, and he'll come all the way up to base camp. He walks up to base camp and blesses us. So you kind of just feel that throughout the climb. You see that your Sherpas are, they have the prayer flags, and people just kind of see it as a kitschy thing in the United States, but they actually sit there and hold them and read them. And so you kind of have that. You have this sense of how sacred that mountain is. And what you find in a lot of these really remote cultures that are near mountains is that the mountain tends to be a god of some form. It's either a provider, or it's a warrior, or a defender. The name for Everest in the local language in Nepal, Chomolungma, means Mother Earth. It's like mother, it is the goddess of the earth. And so you really do get that sense. And a lot of them, they just have really fun songs. They'll share meals with you. And so that's really different from place to place. So there's an incredible cultural experience on all the mountains.
That's pretty amazing. Well, I think we could listen to you for hours. That's pretty fascinating, and congratulations. I can't imagine what that must have been like to have accomplished something so critically important in your life. That's amazing. I'm going to ask Ben if you wouldn't mind just stop sharing for just a minute, and I'm just going to share one slide.
See, I'm just trying to.
That's okay. You know what? I can do it.
Yeah, if you press share, you might be able to override.
Yeah,
me.
I think I can. I can override you.
Okay, there you go.
Power I have.
Even though you've summited Mount Everest.
You have the power.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
I did. I don't know if
Okay,
everyone
great.
can see it, but I just wanted to give a plug for our upcoming program. Is up next is the Boston Red Sox versus the Cleveland Indians, and just to highlight our conflicts here between our baseball teams, but the opportunity to learn about the history of the baseball rivalry between these two teams. So please join us on August 31st at 11 a.m. for that program. And thanks so much for joining us today. Did I freeze up the whole time?
No.
No, I just, the slide wasn't there, so there it is.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Great.
I don't know. Felt like we were freezing up there. So sorry for that technical difficulty. But anyway, we hope you'll join us on the 31st. And Ben and Ty, I hope you'll come back and continue to share some of your journeys in the years ahead, because it sure was a great opportunity to hear and experience this with you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Thanks,
That
Ty.
was wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.